That is a fallacy. A spring can only store the amount of weight placed against it. It's not a multiplier. Hey everybody, today I wanted to talk to you about selecting the right spring for your car. What you want to do, if at all possible, is get a front and rear weight on the car. And for simple math terms, we'll say you have a 600-pound front end of the car. And you want 2 inches of suspension compression or spring compression on the front of the car. You would choose a 150-pound spring. Because you've got a 600-pound front weight, you divide that by 2 since you have 2 springs and you want them to compress 2 inches, you would get a 150-pound spring. These are rated at 12 inches, 150 pounds, and this spring would compress 2 inches from the weight of the car. There is an internet myth about longer, lighter springs transfer or store more energy. That is a fallacy. A spring can only store the amount of weight placed against it. It's not a multiplier. It doesn't magically add force or add weight to the suspension or to the chassis. So basically, whatever weight you put against the spring is all it's going to compress. So if you think that going with a longer, lighter spring is going to help you store more energy, a spring is not a multiplier. It cannot store any more energy. Again, for instance, this is a 12-inch, 150-pound spring. So for every 150 pounds of weight placed against the spring, it's going to compress 1 inch. And that's all. If it compresses 3 inches, that would be 450 pounds. It's not going to multiply that energy. It's got 450 pounds of energy against it, and it will release that. Now, the difference between a longer, lighter spring and a shorter, heavier spring is the duration that it takes to release that energy stored in that spring. So a longer, lighter spring takes a little bit longer because the car has to travel an extra 2 or 3 inches to release that energy. Sometimes that's not a bad thing, but sometimes it's not a good thing either. With today's suspension technology, you can typically do a lot better with a shorter spring. Typically on the front, we like to use a 12-inch spring just for the simple fact that we can set the spanner up in the middle and have 2 inches of upward travel, 2 inches of downward travel to adjust crank center line height and to get the center of gravity right with that. So if you're running a longer, lighter spring, you're going to end up at the very bottom of the spanner. You can't lower the front end down if you get into a wheelie situation, and you can only raise it up, and chances are that's only going to hurt the situation if you're in a wheelie having wheelie issues. So when choosing a spring, find out the weight of your car, if at all possible. And you can call in and talk to our tech guys at Team Z here pretty much anytime, and they can help you choose the right spring for your car.